Once there was a woman who longed to have a child of her own. She decided to go to a witch and ask her for help.
Old witch, I would dearly like to have a child of my own. Can you help me?
Yes, of course. Here's a barley corn for you. Take it home and plant it in a pot. Then wait to see what happens.
The old woman thanked the witch and hurried home. Once there, she planted the grain in a pot. Not long after, a flower began to grow from the pot. The old woman exclaimed in excitement and bent down to kiss the petals of the flower that grew before her. As she did, the petals burst open. Sitting in the middle of the flower was a little girl.
Why, she is no bigger than the tip of my thumb. I will call her Thumbelina.
One night, while Thumbelina was asleep, a toad hopped through the window.
Now there's a handsome wife for my son.
The toad picked up Thumbelina and hopped with her back home. Her son was in awe when he laid his eyes on Thumbelina, and all he could say was,
Croak, croak.
Don't speak so loudly, you might wake her. We must put her somewhere where she cannot escape.
After a moment, she decided to swim out and set her on the leaf of the biggest water lily. When Thumbelina woke and saw where she was, she began to cry.
I do not want to marry a big, ugly toad and live in a house with him under the mud.
Under the leaf Thumbelina sat on, the fish heard her cries and came up. They decided they couldn't let Thumbelina marry the toad, so they swam up to the stalk that held the leaf and gnawed away until at last the lily floated free. Thumbelina was happy. She didn't see the beetle fly overhead. Then all of a sudden she felt a pair of claws lift her off the lily. Thumbelina was afraid, but there was nothing she could do. The beetle put her down on a large leaf.
You are very pretty.
The other beetles who lived in the tree came out to look at her.
Why, she has only got 2 legs.
And she hasn't got any feelers.
And look how thin her waist is. Ugh, she is not pretty at all.
The beetle who found her decided that they were right, so he put Thumbelina back on the ground. All summer, Thumbelina lived alone in the forest. She adapted and did what she could to survive, but summer passed and the days grew colder. One day, while wandering about, Thumbelina found herself outside the forest. She noticed a door. Behind it lived a field mouse.
Please, may I have a piece of your barley corn to eat?
You poor thing. Come inside, come inside. I'll allow you to stay here, but you must clean my house and tell me stories. I like to listen to stories.
One day, the field mouse told Thumbelina that her neighbor, a mole, was coming to visit them.
He is very rich and clever. He would make you a fine husband. He cannot see very well, but he lives in a big house.
Thumbelina did not care how rich and clever he was. She did not want to marry a mole. But when the mole came to visit, she sang so sweetly that the mole fell in love with her. He told them that he had dug a passage that linked their houses together.
You may go along it whenever you like. Follow me and I will show you the way.
He took a piece of rotten wood which glowed in the dark and led them along the tunnel.
There is a bird in this passage, but don't be afraid, for it's dead.
It was a swallow. Thumbelina felt so sorry for it, but the mole shoved the bird aside with its stubby legs. Thumbelina said nothing, but as soon as they turned their backs, she bent down and kissed it on its closed eyes. That night, Thumbelina could not sleep, so she took a blanket, crept back down the passage, and spread it over the bird.
Farewell, pretty bird. Thank you for singing to me all summer, when the trees were green and the sun shone all day.
Then she laid her head on its heart. She heard. The bird's heart was beating. It was alive. The next night, she came back to see the bird again. It opened its eyes and thanked her.
You saved my life. Soon I will be able to fly away.
All winter long, the bird stayed in the passage and Thumbelina watched over it. When spring came, the bird flew away. Thumbelina grew very fond of the bird and was sad to see it go. One day, the field mouse told Thumbelina that she was going to marry the mole. She grew sad and hated the idea of having the mole as her husband. The day of the wedding arrived. She heard a bird sing overhead and realized it was the swallow.
Come away with me. I will take you to a land where the sun always shines.
Thumbelina climbed on the swallow's back, and they flew away. Up over trees and lakes, through snowy mountains. Down the swallow flew and landed on the ground near pillars of the marble palace.
My nest is high up on a marble column, but you will be better down here on one of these flowers.
I should like that.
The swallow set her down gently on one of the flowers. There in the middle of its petals stood a little prince. He was as fine and as delicate as Thumbelina herself. He was the king of the flower people.
He is very beautiful.
Thumbelina thought as the prince said to himself.
Isn't she lovely? I would like to marry her.
He took the crown from his head and put it on hers.
Marry me and be queen of all the flowers.
Thumbelina was filled with joy and accepted to be his wife. That summer, the swallow bid a sad farewell to Thumbelina and flew back to his nest under the window of a teller of tales. The swallow told the tale to the teller, and that is how we came to know the story of Thumbelina.